Well, sneaky big news elsewhere in sports as we try and figure out which quarterback is going to be the second one selected in this year's draft. We know Cam Ward is going to go number one, but I want you to look at what's going on right now at ESPN Bet. 3 weeks ago, Shedeur Sanders was a runaway favorite to be the second quarterback selected. Look at that. He was minus 1,600. As of today, those odds have dropped to minus 225. And Jaxson Dart's numbers continue creeping closer and closer. Suddenly, he's only plus 160, which begs the question, Peter Schrager, am I living in a world where a week from Thursday night, I might hear Roger Goodell say the name Jaxson Dart before I hear him say the name Shedeur Sanders?
9 days out, I'd be very surprised if Jaxson Dart went before Shedeur Sanders. However, this is becoming one of those drafts amongst the front office personnel I'm talking to. Cam Ward is one, and then it's pick your flavor. It's a little bit of Baskin Robbins. Are you looking for the big arm? That might be Tyler Shuck out of Louisville. Are you looking for the speedster out of the pocket? That could be Jalen Milroe, who, by the way, Greeny, was invited to attend the draft, which always raises my eyebrow.
And accepted.
And accepted it, and will be there. Or if you like a big arm and maybe a guy who's got the years with the Ole Miss, Jaxson Dart could be your guy, but I would still think Shedeur is number 2 off the board.
What are you hearing, Jeff?
Well, to me, the biggest question mark now is what happens at number 9 with the Saints. I think that changes the complexion of everything there, because if you are in love with Jaxson Dart or Shedeur Sanders, it just, as we always know, it just takes one team. So is there a team that's going to want to jump ahead at 9, get ahead of the Saints to get their guy, since the veil of secrecy is out? I mean, we know that the Saints have to address that position at this point. So now, if you love Jaxson Dart, are you going to jump ahead of 9 to get him? If you love Shedeur Sanders, are you going to do the same?
Yeah, that's really, and what I think is an interesting point to make here is when you read the mock drafts that we see all over the place, Mel is mocking Shedeur Sanders to go number 9, and every mock draft that you see has Shedeur ahead of Jaxson Dart. That's the consensus, right? You guys are making 8 million phone calls. You're hearing from 8 million people, and probably 90% of them like Shedeur Sanders more than they like Jaxson Dart. But these drafts aren't made by consensus. They're made by, at the end of the day, one person sitting in a room. So all it takes is one person, that one person, to decide, no, I like Jaxson Dart better than I like Shedeur Sanders. It would not be what everyone would do, but it might be what that one team winds up doing. RC, how do you see this situation?
Greeny, you know why you're amazing on TV? Because when things don't make sense, you have this amazing ability to make them make sense to people who don't know anything. Because here's what's going on. That ain't happening. And if a team decides they're in love with Jaxson Dart, and so in love with Jaxson Dart that they're going to jump in front of the Saints and pick Jaxson Dart before the number 9th overall pick, then they are dead wrong. And they aren't that smart. And they're a team that isn't looking forward to their franchise for years to come. They're just making irrational decisions in 2025. Jaxson Dart is still a project. Jaxson Dart is a guy who could push the football down the field. We sat with Lane Kiffin recently on the pivot, and it'll be coming out at the end of this week. And he talks about his ability to manipulate offense based on the defenses that he's seen. His ability to call plays and see things from the sideline like he has a joystick in his hand. Jaxson Dart was afforded that privilege of Lane Kiffin that he won't be afforded in the playoffs. He's not a starter day one. And if you pick him before number 9, he better be, and you better be sure of that. And if you are, your evaluation process is off.
I would just say one thing, a cautionary tale. Last year, I don't know any mock drafts or any pundits 9 days out who had Michael Penix Jr. going before J.J. McCarthy, and that's exactly what happened. Things change in the days leading up to this.
No, that's exactly the point. It just takes one team to decide we want to make that move. That's a perfect illustration of the point I was trying to make. Okay, the draft stuff is coming fast and furious. We'll have more of it as we go. I'm about to tell you, Adam Schefter is reporting that Shedeur Sanders is going to hold one last private workout Thursday for the Giants, who have the 3rd pick in the draft. They had a full contingent in attendance for his and Travis Hunter's pro day on April 4th. But obviously they want one last private look at Shedeur before the draft next Thursday. I feel like this could mean a lot of different things. Peter, help me make sense of this.
It's not nothing. And if you're a Giants fan at home saying, whatever, it's just no. You have to understand how much the Giants have invested time into meeting and being with Shedeur Sanders. They sent 13 different people from the organization to the Colorado Pro Day. They had him in on a 30 day visit and then took him out to dinner. They also went to multiple games of Colorado's where Joe Shane went and attended in person on a Saturday before the Giants played on a Sunday. And they also attended a practice with Colorado. So for them to now, 9 days out of the draft, and this will be a week before the draft, spend their time flying out to Boulder, Colorado to get one last look at Shedeur Sanders, it tells me they not only are interested in Shedeur Sanders, but they want to know every last thing about Shedeur Sanders. This is not just a smokescreen. You don't do this. You don't waste your time getting on a flight and going from East Rutherford to Boulder a week before the draft unless you are actually interested in either selecting Shedeur Sanders at 3 or maneuvering the chessboard to get up and get him later in the first round.
Those were the first thoughts that I had was, does this mean the Giants are seriously considering taking him at 3? Or does this mean the Giants are reading the tea leaves and thinking, we're living in a world now where he may be available into the 20s and we might trade up from the second round where they currently sit with the second pick in that second round to try and make a move for him? Obviously, we don't know that answer one way or another. Well, Big Swagu, the floor is yours. What do you make of the Giants and Shedeur getting together 1 week before the draft, one final time?
Yeah, I make of it what the history of the league tells us. And I agree with Peter that this is a serious moment for the New York Giants. Whether they're positioning to trade up to get Shedeur Sanders or whether they're positioning to take him 3rd in the draft overall, I don't think you can ever take this position for granted. And we've seen these franchises in quarterback purgatory. So you do your due diligence all the way up until the last hour. I've never subscribed to the fact that the Giants are just going to let Shedeur Sanders sit there if they understand that he can potentially be a franchise-leading quarterback. And here's the other thing, too. We got to give a lot of credit to Brian Daboll. Brian Daboll went to Buffalo when Josh Allen was struggling and trying to find his footing and put him in the right situation. And now we've seen what Josh Allen has turned into from a quarterback's perspective. We saw Daniel Jones play better, i.e. giving him $100 million. Now, I'm still thinking they crazy over that, but Brian Daboll obviously coached him well enough to put him in that position. You watch Shedeur Sanders play. He plays with rhythm, he plays with time, and people have talked about the porous offensive line that he had, which caused a lot of issues with him in college. When I watched Shedeur play, it felt like he had NFL cachet. It felt like he understood that this game on this level has to be played cerebrally first before you get to anything else. And I think the Giants are exploring that and are going to continue to explore that all the way until we get to Green Bay and that 3rd pick is on the clock.
RC.
Yeah, I think, when you look at what the Giants are doing, they're doing exactly what you need to do when you have the 3rd overall pick and you're contemplating getting a quarterback. Marcus mentioned quarterback purgatory, and that's exactly where they are. You have a quarterback room that's probably good enough to get you through a season with Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston. Now, what that wins you is probably nothing. You don't win the NFC East. You don't win a playoff game. And if you're Brian Daboll and Joe Shane, that could cost you your job. So if Shedeur Sanders is the guy that you can have play this year and have him show the Mara family that, okay, we are moving in the right direction with a young player that we have touched, we have put our imprint on, we've got into the system, and moving forward, this could be a guy that brings us to the next level, that's enough to keep your job. And so if you are the Giants contingent, you know that you can't miss if you draft him early and he's not what you think he was. You also know that you can't pass on him, have him become a star in his rookie season after watching what Saquon Barkley did in Philadelphia. As the man told you, my worst nightmare is him going to Philly. And so if you're the Giants, you have to make sure that you absolutely hit a home run with the 3rd overall pick, and that's what they're doing.
And if you're the owner, you do not want to hear that being the reasoning, that they're taking a quarterback because we're trying to save our jobs. What's the best thing for the team? What's the best thing for the organization? This team actually has a pretty good front 7 in Dexter Lawrence and Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns, and they added 2 key players in the back. They like their defense. You add an Abdul Carter to that front 7, the Giants actually have a strength to their team. I would hate for them to draft a quarterback for the sake of, well, if we don't and we go 8-10 with Russell and Jameis, we're out of jobs. That would be the absolute wrong reason for Shedeur Sanders to be the third overall.
I agree, and yet it happens all the time. I want to try and bounce something off you guys, okay? And Marcus and then RC, I'm dying to hear your perspective on this, because I host the First Draft podcast, so I've been having these conversations with Mel Kiper and Field Yates pretty much all season long. But for the fans who don't really know it, who don't watch Shedeur Sanders play and all that stuff, Brian Daboll became a legend by turning Josh Allen into a great quarterback. Shedeur Sanders is the exact opposite of Josh Allen, okay? Josh Allen he was enormous. He was a ridiculous athlete. He could throw a ball through a car wash without it getting wet and needed to learn the nuances of playing quarterback, and Brian Daboll taught him that. Shedeur Sanders is the exact opposite of that. His strengths are the nuances. That's what he's great at. He's great at exactly what Marcus said, the rhythm, the timing, and all that stuff. But he's not that big. He doesn't have a cannon for an arm. He's not a ridiculous athlete. And those are things that probably aren't going to change.
No, G, look, it's a luxury, but I'll never subscribe to a quarterback that can operate and maneuver from the pocket and be a precision passer and push the ball down the field and make great decisions of being a quarterback that you can't win with. Like, when you look at Shedeur Sanders, obviously it's not eye-popping athleticism. It's enough to navigate the pocket and get where you need to get. It's enough to get 5 to 7 yards and get you a first down to continue to keep the sticks moving. And I knew at some point, we've been doing this show for a long time together, I knew at some point that everybody, because of Lamar, because of Josh, because of what we've seen Patrick Mahomes do, we would get to this point where if we don't see those traits in a quarterback, we don't think that they could function in the NFL. Mm-hmm. RC made a great point a couple years ago when C.J. Stroud was taken. And everybody waited to see if C.J. Stroud was athletic enough in that playoff game against Georgia to determine if he would be a good quarterback in the NFL. We hadn't seen him move around the pocket like that a lot. But what we did know was he was a pinpoint accurate quarterback. He could throw the deep ball. He had great accuracy. He understood when the ball needed to come out of his hands. He understood concepts as well. So I still think it works in the NFL. It's a luxury to have a guy that can break the pocket and take it 50 or 60. But in reality, they ain't coming out of the draft every year. And they are anomalies still, even though we've grown accustomed to watching these dudes operate at a high level, the ones that we talk about.
It's a great way to put it, RC. Is it a luxury or a necessity to have all those other things that in the NFL 20 years ago you wouldn't have even thought about?
Yeah, no, I definitely think it's a luxury. And in some of those cases, it's a luxury because the quarterback doesn't have some of the other things that you have to develop when you've played your life or played your entire career without some of those things that can't be taught, without the speed, without the big time arm. And so you learn to adjust throughout your entire playing career to be as good, to be as productive as Shedeur Sanders is. I want to go back to a point that Peter made early on after I spoke about what the Giants are doing in their due diligence. I'm not saying they need to just go draft Shedeur Sanders because they want to try to keep their job. I'm saying they need to do their due diligence to make sure that the decision that they make is the right decision, that the decision that they make is the best decision for not only this team this year, but for the organization going forward. And that doesn't mean you have to get a guy like Josh who can run the football. You don't have to get a guy like Lamar Jackson who can turn nothing into something, because a lot of those times, those players are turning something into something, as in something they missed, as in something they didn't determine before the ball was snapped, as into something they didn't see during their drop. So now they have to use that athleticism. What you want from Shedeur Sanders is to not get to that point based off of the things he already does well, Greeny.
Yeah, I agree with you. And so we're having two different conversations at once, and they're both interesting, Peter. To the other point, though, about guys, people in the league doing things to save their jobs. The reality is it happens, and it has to. When you have someone whose job is on the line, and this happens, I yell and scream about this all the time. You're going to get sick of me doing it over the course of time. But when you have people who are lame ducks in their jobs, it is unrealistic to expect them not to take that into consideration when they make decisions. And now all of a sudden you have agendas that may not always be lined up, and that's where you get yourself into trouble.
I don't think there is pressure from the fans in the New York market to get Shedeur Sanders, where this is one of those where I need to win public favor. I need to do something. I don't think Shedeur Sanders necessarily sells out MetLife Stadium on opening day. Now, he might be a very good starting quarterback. In fact, I would go as far as saying he can be a very good starting quarterback in the NFL. But this is not an Andrew Luck, Trevor Lawrence type prospect. It's not even one of these dazzling, scintillating ones with all the athletic traits where you're like, Anthony Richardson. We see the high end, like we can do this. Or you go, Zach Wilson threw that pass at the pro day. Shedeur isn't that guy, and I don't think the Giants fans are banging down the doors to get Shedeur. That's when you see GMs and coaches reach for a quarterback because the public pressure is too much, and it's, okay, phew, at least I'm not going to be dragged in the media. I don't see that with this prospect with this team.